This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Katie, co-host of Coffee with Keith and Katie here on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Coffee with Keith and Katie, where we talk about the adventures of our daily lives and relationship. A new show comes out every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 p.m. Central. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Coffee with Keith and Katie. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to How to Write Good. I'm your host, Daniel Poppie. Find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. A little more. You probably can find out more about me if you actually listen to the podcast as opposed to go to my website, because I'm really, like I've said in the past, I'm really bad with social media. I've been trying to do better with social media. I have been doing better with social media, putting stuff up, but I'm really bad with it. I'm really bad at posting stuff. I'm good at getting everything done for this podcast, but yeah, I probably talk more about myself on here and have more content about what I think, and well, of course I do, than on my website. But that is hopefully going to change fairly soon. Please like and share How to Write Good on Facebook if you haven't already. I started this podcast today, and I was recording it, and I didn't have headphones because I have no idea where my headphones went. I misplaced them somewhere. And I started talking, and I couldn't take my own voice. I'm sure that a lot of people relate to that. You start to hear your voice and it's really loud. And I have to project when I do this. I have to project when I talk into this, because if I talk right into the microphone, I guess it gets a little louder. But I don't like to talk right into the microphone. I like to be a little ways off. And I like yelling at people. Anyways. So yeah, like and share How to Write Good on Facebook if you do enjoy the podcast. It's growing every single day, every single week as we speak. It's growing modestly. The people listening to it, which is all right, which is okay, because as I've said in the past, one of the reasons why I'm doing this is for my own development. I think that's just fine. If you haven't already, please check out Public House Media. Public House Media brings you How to Write Good, so they essentially host the podcast. They make all the stuff for it. They don't make the podcast itself. I do that, of course. Otherwise, you'd have someone else talking. But they've got a lot of other podcasts. But I'm assuming if you came to How to Write Good, either you don't know what it is, or you do know what it is, and that's kind of your wheelhouse. That's your interest. That's not your wheelhouse, but it might be. So we have two words of the day, and they are two different words, all right? And I don't know if I said this on this podcast in the past, and I'm sorry if this is I'm rephrasing this, but I just want to be able to share this with you. So this comes to you from the great, and I say great, podcast of the History of English. It's the History of English podcast, actually. And I like listening to it. I am quite far. I finally got into English. So the History of English starts way back with the Proto-Indo-European language, and then it kind of weaves its way through, because that's where the English language comes from. That's also, if you are wondering, is where the Indian language comes from. I think Hindi comes from that as well. So European languages, most of them, besides a few, European languages are from, like, Latin languages and Germanic languages, so English and German and French and Spanish, and the northern languages like Danish and Dutch, etc., are from the Indo-European language, which branched off, and it kept on changing and evolving until it became the languages you have today. Okay? I think Basque, I don't think is Indo-European. I don't know if this is true, and I feel like I've told you this on the podcast before, but if I haven't, you'll get to hear it now. So Basque, and I've got to check this out, so I've got to confirm this. So I'm going to make myself a note as I tell you this. So if you hear any noise, it's because I'm moving around. But Basque may be related to Hittite. I'm not 100% certain on that. I have to look it up. But I believe it might be related to Hittite. If it isn't, it is, I believe it's the only language in its language family. So English is a Germanic language. Its core is Germanic, and you have a lot of other stuff from a lot of different languages, but it is a Germanic language. And because it developed from the Germanic languages, that's why it is. And it has German, it has Norwegian, Danish is Germanic, Dutch is Germanic. All those Northern European countries are Germanic. Italian is a Latin language, so it would be, I don't know what you'd consider that family. It's the Latin language group, so French is, and Spanish as well. But our word of the week, our word of the week comes from History of English podcast. So check that out. This is a little tidbit I grabbed from there so that you can enjoy it as well. It is 2 words, like I said, angle and angler. All right, angle is like a 90-degree angle. It's a corner. It's a change in direction of an object, essentially. An angler is a fisherman. Now, these two words, that's what you call them. These 2 words are actually from 2 different languages. Angler, the angle, as in a corner, is from, I believe, it's from the Germanic languages. And I hope I'm not screwing these up. So that's from the Germanic languages. And angler, like a fisherman, is from Latin. But the cool thing about this word, these 2 words actually, because they are different words, they came from different languages, is that they have the same Proto-Indo-European root. So if you look at it, there's kind of like a tree, and the Germanic languages are they're one big limb of the tree, and then English is one of the branches that comes off the limb, and another one of the branches is the Latin languages, those the Romance languages, I guess you call them, that are another limb. The Romance languages are another limb, and like Spanish is a branch on that limb. So angler, as in a fisherman, comes from that Latin limb, and English comes from angle, like a 90-degree angle, comes from the English limb, but both the words come from the same same Indo-European root. My gosh, it comes from the same Indo-European root, which I think is really cool. Okay. All right, so for our accidental essence, we are going to be talking about clickbait. All right, and I hate clickbait. And I think most people hate clickbait. I don't know why. Well, I do know why people use clickbait because, well, it's kind of an old thing now. It's been around since people have been accessing the internet en masse, right? En masse, I guess. That's how you say it. But since most people have been using the internet, clickbait has been a thing. Whether that be the chain emails. Does anybody remember chain emails? I can't believe chain emails existed once. Nobody ever uses emails, but I remember as a kid getting a chain email, and it was talking about how, like, you're this person, you're going to have a ghost visit you if you don't forward this, or you don't actually you don't actually care about puppies if you don't forward this. And then it tried to guilt you into forwarding it. It's just like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Or you're going to have good luck too. So you either intimidate someone, you make them fear and they forward it, or you make them, what do you call it? Or you make them guilty, or you make them think they're going to be rich. But yeah, I believe that those. And if you're younger, if you're probably 20 years old, you may have not experienced chain emails, and that's really bizarre to me because 20-year-olds are pretty stinking old. So it's bizarre to me that if you're only about 20 years old, you may not have experienced them. You may have missed the era of chain emails. There used to be chain letters, I suppose, and I missed that era. And I kind of got that with chain emails. And it was just the predecessor to memes. Just think of chain emails and chain letters as the predecessor to memes, except they were annoying. Okay? Well, to a certain degree. There were some that were fun. So you get like this. It was. Actually, now that I think about it, chain emails were the predecessor to memes. And maybe chain mail was too. But you'd get some funny stuff in there. And that's essentially what memes are. And now we have social media, whatever that is. And now you have social media so everyone can see it. It's more streamlined. Instead of it being sent from one person to the other, to the other, to the other, it's more streamlined. I remember meeting new people and you getting their email address. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but I'm not that old. But I was at the cusp of that, and that happened. And I don't know, maybe if you're 20, it happened to you too. But those titles, a lot of titles to chain emails were clickbait, and you had the people being like, oh, like follow this link and you're going to win a prize, or you're going to be entered into this lottery, or you're going to be entered into the sweepstakes. And people would follow it because they're like, oh, I don't know what's up with this. But everybody knows what clickbait is, and I don't even know I exist anymore. Because everybody knows what clickbait is. It's a joke now. And there's still clickbait around. Well, when I was younger, and maybe it's something that people run into when they're younger. When you're younger, maybe you're more likely to click on clickbait. And I think that people, when I was younger, were more likely to click on clickbait. I'm not sure. I'm not able to see past my own age at that time. I can't tell if like people older than me did. I think if you're really old, maybe you would, because you're not used to how the internet works. Trolling too. With the internet and trolling, if you're younger, if you've been with the internet for a while, you realize trolling is stupid and you just ignore it. You're like, forget about trolling. But if you're new to the internet and you run into trolling, you might be like, man, like, so, it's kind of like the example of trolling, which I think is really funny, is and somebody listening might not agree with me, but I think it's hilarious, is that there was a group of gamers essentially, and they made the country of Kyrgyzstan, and they had a flag for it, and they made the flag look like the Nazi flag. It had like a kind of a design similar to the Nazi flag, and they were essentially trolling. But a lot of people didn't realize they were trolling. They didn't realize that trolling is a joke. A lot of trolling is a joke. Some of it's mean-spirited. A lot of it is a joke, and these people didn't realize the trolling was a joke, so they took it seriously. They're like, look at the Nazi symbolism here, and they're like, yeah, of course, like it's based off of that because it's a joke. I think it's funny. So we're talking about clickbait because clickbait's been around forever, and it's always existed, or it's existed since publishers have existed. That's what I'm saying. I'm going to make the claim that clickbait has existed a very long time because book titles are essentially clickbait, okay? And because book titles are essentially clickbait, and why are they clickbait is, well, think about what the purpose of clickbait is. The purpose of clickbait is to get someone to click on a link, and then you get money each time somebody is clicking on that link and going to your website because they're seeing ads, right? That's what clickbait is. And what's the purpose of a title? People pick up a book, they read the book, you're getting those dollar bills, people, right? Okay, so both are a type of marketing. I would say clickbait's a type of marketing. It's a really annoying type of marketing. Titles are similar to clickbait. Titles are kind of like clickbait because when you look at a book, you don't know what's in the book. When you look at a link to a website, when you look at a title to an article on a computer, you don't know what that's about. But when you're creating a title on a computer, you just say, oh, well, you can't believe what's going to happen here, and people will click on it because they want to know. Now, titles of books are a little more subtle, a little subtler. I shouldn't say more subtle. They're a little subtler, I believe. And, but they still want you to pick up that book. You don't know what's inside that book, so they've got to make that title grabbing enough. They've got to make that title enticing enough that you're like, huh, maybe that's a good book. And, you know, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I actually base whether I pick up a book off a title. I don't usually base it. I think to a certain degree I probably do base it off the cover art, because if it looks like trash, it seems like not as much effort was put into the book. I think because a book takes a long time to write. So let's just say that if you write full time, you put out a book in a year, and I'm sure there's writers who put out more than a book in a year. And you could put out 2 books in a year, but let's just say the extent of time you work on a book is about a year. And that's probably about right. And if you aren't writing full time, you're taking probably a lot longer to write a book. And if you put so much time into the writing of the book, then shouldn't you also put time into the presentation of the book? When you have a book cover that looks like trash, when you have a book cover that looks like trash, it looks like the book, nobody cares about the book. So I think that book covers should be very professional when you put them out. Of course, that's the publisher's deal in a lot of cases. Most authors don't put out their own books. I'm actually in favor of people doing self-publishing, but they've got to, I think, so here's a side note. So self-publishing. I think that one of the issues, and I'll probably talk about this at some other time, I think that there's a lot of people say, oh, you can't make any money off of self-publishing. And I think that one of the issues with people not making money off of self-publishing is that they don't actually put their stuff on a professional level. I think that if they took the time, they developed a book, they got the cover art, they got all this stuff together, they got a copywriter, and they put the money into it, they put the investment into it to do it all professionally. Not that they're going to a publisher, they're going through that process. I think that they'd probably sell more books. And if they actually were really serious about writing the book and made it perfect, or as close to perfect as you can get, I think that what people do is they see all these books that look like no time has been put into them, and they just disregard them. They're like, well, why would I read that? It looks like crap. But that's a side note. So when I read a book, back to my original point, what I usually base when I'm picking up a book, what I usually base it off of is the title. I'm like, that is an interesting title, and I grab the book and I look inside and I look at what it's about, and if I am not interested, I put it away. But it's like the same thing as clickbait, except you have to pay every time you pick up, they're getting paid every time you click on that link. Now with books, I might be reading that book, I can peek inside, but it's getting me to pick it up. So it's essentially functioning as like a type of clickbait, except that books came first and titles came first. Therefore, we should really say that clickbait is a type of title, and a title is just a marketing function. Okay, so both are marketing. And I don't know, I know that clickbait, I'm almost certain, I don't know why it wouldn't be, I'm almost certain as I can be about most things, is that clickbait is essentially about making money. You get people to click on it. It doesn't matter if they read it. It might be really stupid. It might be really dumb. There's a Twitter account that actually, I think it's a Twitter account, and I love it. It's amazing. I think it's a great idea. It essentially tells you what the clickbait, like it gives you a clickbait article, and it tells you what the clickbait article is about. It's a pretty big Twitter account. Follow it if you haven't already, and then you can not worry about all the clickbait going past your eyes, I guess. But clickbait's focused on money, and I don't know if titles have always been focused on money. I wouldn't doubt that many authors, and especially publishers. So, quick side note, if there's a publisher, publishers do have a say in the title of the book. Okay, so when you're publishing a book, if you go through the traditional methods, you are responsible for the writing of that book, and then there's going to be editors who give you feedback on the book, and some changes are made to the book to make the book better if you have a good editor, or make it worse if you have a bad editor, etc. There's multiple different types of editors, but you are responsible as an author for the content of that book. But everything else about that book is marketing. Everything else about that book is to sell it. Okay, now the cover is to sell it, how it looks, how it feels, what paper's used. If you have crappy paper, if the book always rips, if it's bad material, people aren't going to buy it. But you have a say in the title as an author, but even that is, there's suggestions made to you. You may, I don't know if it's in every case, I don't know if it's in many cases, but it may be the case that you give up your original title that you had. Okay, so especially with publishers want the title to sell the book, and that makes sense because they're in the business of selling books, so they're going to focus their efforts on being like, hey, is this book marketable? No, it isn't. Okay, how can we make this book marketable, or how can we make this book more marketable? Okay, and authors, I think that a lot of authors through the ages and even far into the past have made their titles of their books in a specific way to make money. And even if they don't make it in a specific way to get those dollar bills, you're going to make the title in a way that people want to read it, that people want to read that book. So if I looked at a title, if I was writing a book and if I was making a title, I'd want to make a title that grabs the eye, that's like, that's really interesting. And you pick up the book and you see what it's about, like I do. In the library, people. In the library, okay, sometimes I go to bookstores, but you want people to at least see what it's about and maybe get them interested. So if someone picks up your book, that's excellent, right? because the purpose of a book is to be read, and of course there's other aspects of a book besides being read, but the utility, like the other reasons a book is written, can't happen unless it's read. All right, let's just say that. So one example, and I don't even know if this is true, but I've heard the story multiple times, and it's a good anecdote and it's fun, so I'm going to tell it. So the story goes, there's the band Bare Naked Ladies, correct. Most people know about the band. If you don't know about the band, I don't know where you've been living. Maybe you're a little younger. Maybe younger people don't know about the band Bare Naked Ladies, but people who are really young, maybe you're 15 years old, maybe you're 13. There's a band called Bare Naked Ladies, if you're not aware. They're pretty good. They were pretty famous. I don't know when they got famous. They were famous in the early 2000s, really famous in the early 2000s. They're kind of like Green Day. Green Day was really famous in the early 2000s. If you don't know about Green Day, you're probably too young or too old too. They were really famous in the early 2000s, Green Day was. And then they kind of just went downhill. They were like huge. And people thought they were so cool. And then eventually people were like, well, you're not actually that good. They're not that good at their instruments. Blink-182 wasn't good at their instruments. Their drummer was really good, but everybody else was just okay. But Bare Naked Ladies, as the story goes, and I don't know if this is true or not now that I think about it. I've never actually verified this, but it's a good anecdote, like I said. They had a different name, and they weren't getting anybody to come to their shows. And I would say Bare Naked Ladies, they're pretty good musicians as it goes. And so they changed their name to Bare Naked Ladies, and then they suddenly started getting people to their shows. Their name's Clickbait, okay? Their name's Clickbait because it gets people to their shows. Now, the question is focusing on selling books a good way to title a book? So it's like, okay, what is the title that is going to be the best title to sell this book? You would think it would sell. I'm sure it does sell books. All right, let's just be fair about that. I'm sure that focusing on selling books and being like, okay, what's the best title to sell books? I'm sure it does sell books. It's the same way that people click on clickbait. So they click on the clickbait article and they're like, oh, this is stupid. I think that if you try to sell a book, well, if I wanted to sell a book, I just make an outrageous title, right? I would just make Donnie G goes and kills everybody in the world, and people would probably pick up the book because it'd just be a really bizarre title. It'd stick in their mind, and they'd be like, what is this book about? And then they read the blurb, and they'd be like, well, this book isn't at all about what this title is. I think that's a very I'm hyperbolizing it right now. That's a bit of hyperbole on my part. But in some cases, the book titles that are used are stupid. It's true. And I think that looking at marketing as your sole purpose when creating a book title, or as your focus when creating a book title, is a short game. It's the short game. And I think there's a better way to title books. That's the long game. So when I refer to short game and long game, it's like instant gratification. So if you do something for instant gratification, it typically isn't good for you in the long run. And something that's the long game. So if I'm trying to get rich really quickly, I'm probably going to go and sell drugs. I'm probably going to sell illegal drugs, and I'll get rich really quickly, and I'll have a chance of going to jail and stuff like that. It's a really quick fix. I can probably make a lot of money really fast, make a lot of money to use. If I am looking at the long game for making money, it's going to look a lot different. It's going to take a lot more time. It's going to be a lot more stable, a lot stabler. I don't know. It's going to be a lot stabler than if I go and sell drugs, because the cops aren't going to be after me, right? It's not going to be illicit gain. So, I think that authors should look at the long game when they're titling books. Instead of thinking, what's the best way to sell this book right now? Think of, what's the best title to fit this book to make it help it stand the test of time as a book. Now, if you have a really bad book, so every book I write, so if you have a really bad book, it's probably not going to happen. But you're looking for the best possible title, all right? Now, I missed something right here. So, just because your book is awful doesn't mean it's not going to be a classic, okay? So, even if you're like, man, I am the worst author in the world, I am the worst author in the world. I'm the worst writer in the world. If you haven't seen, it's essentially a meme now. There's memes out of it, but the movie The Room, if you haven't, just look up The Room on YouTube, and it's essentially, I don't know what the plot is even, but it's now iconic. It's an awful movie. It's done in an awful way, but it's so bad it's good. So don't worry. But you've got to be careful when you're naming your book or whatever story you're doing, because it's going to be stuck with that name, right? So when you're naming a book, I think that people should look at what the essence of the book is. So what's the core of that book? And then you're trying to look at the best title for that book. You're not being like, oh, does this sound good for selling? You're looking at, okay, what's the best way to sum up this book? But you're not even necessarily summing up the book. You're not giving the main idea. I don't even think you're necessarily giving the theme. Like I said, you're looking at the essence of the book. And during my episode on logic, and I go back to this a lot, so maybe if you haven't listened to it, maybe listen to that. Maybe listen to that episode. I put cup my hands around my mouth right there, if you could hear better. So you'd be able to hear better. But the essence, when I mean the essence, it's the core of something. So what do I need for that thing to be that thing? And when you're titling a book, I really think you need to look at the core of that book. And you're trying to make a title that sums up that book in one word, that when people read the book, or if it's a longer story, so if you have a movie or if you have a TV show, you're not just giving a summary or a plot summary of the book. When people go through the whole entire book, they'll look back on the book and be like, or they'll look up, if maybe it's a long form story, they'll look back on the story and they'll be like, that was a really good title for that book. So that's what you're trying to do. I think it's something that takes a lot of time. I think it takes a lot of thinking. And I think that when you're making a title of a book, I think that you need to take a lot of time doing it. And I think that you need to take a lot of thought doing it, because titling a book is kind of similar to writing a book. All right. So when you're writing a book, you're trying to put the words together in the best way possible to convey the idea you're trying to convey. And I'm not doing it very well right now, but you're trying to put words together in the best way possible. And in the same way for a title, you're trying to put words together in the best way possible to convey the idea of the book, to convey that core of the book, not just the summary, like I said, but the core of the book. Okay, so now with this last few minutes, I am actually going to go through a few bad titles and a few good titles. Now, just to be fair, I got all the bad titles and all the good titles off of a list of titles that people thought was stupid, that were stupid. So all these titles are titles that people said, these are really bad titles. These are awful titles. These are stupid titles. Now, I am not determining whether the title fits with the book. I think that the title needs to fit with the book. I think that's imperative, that the title fits with the book. I am just using titles based on the aesthetic, all right, of the title. So here it goes. Here's a bad title for you. Triggermen, Shadow Team, Spider-Man, The Magnificent Bastards, and The American Combat Sniper. I don't know if I can say that on here. Whoops. I might have to bleep that out. All right. That actually might be a good title. I may have that title may have grown on me. All right, another bad title that I say it's not aesthetically pleasing is Every Man a Tiger. All right, I've got so many bad titles I had to get an extra piece of paper for them. I know it won't take forever to go through these. All right, so here's another title I don't think is aesthetically pleasing. It's not a good combination of words. The Songs of the Humpback Whale. Not a good collection of words. So let's go over to a good title. Another BS Night. It's swearing in Suck City. And why do I think this is a good title? Now, the title itself has profanity in it, and somebody might not like the profanity, but the title rolls off the tongue. Now, when we're talking about aesthetics, the issue with aesthetics is when you're talking about aesthetics in art, you can't really explain. I'm doing something right now. I'm crossing something out. I'm sorry. You can't really explain why something is good with art. Okay. Well, you can try to explain it. You can go through it. But if you're looking at it from a materialistic worldview, It's hard to explain why something in art is good. Now, if I say, oh, why is my cell phone good? Well, does it work, right? Does it do what it's supposed to do? Does it, is it built well? Is it going to last a long time? Does it have a fast processing speed? These are more tangible ways that I can tell if a cell phone is good, or even a pair of gloves. But when I run into art doesn't have a very tangible, reason for existing. I believe there's reasons for art existing, but you have to get beyond the materialistic worldview to start saying, oh, whether this is good or bad in art, which is maybe the reason why people have, maybe that's the reason why the artistic community, and I say stuff about this all the time, accepts art that's awful. But the reason why I have that title, Another BS Night in Suck City, is because it has an aesthetic quality when you say it. It like rolls off the tongue, and I don't know why certain... it's kind of like writing itself. When you're a writer, you're essentially trying to sense or think through what is the best way to write this, what's going to roll off the tongue. And it's almost certainly likely that in different languages, certain strings of words and ideas roll off the tongue better. Okay? And I'll probably talk about that some other time. All right, so another bad title is The Stainless Steel Rat Saves the World. That also might be a good title depending on what you do. No, I don't think it's a very good title. Here's one that I like, and this is more for the meaning and what it does to you and what it makes you think about rather than the aesthetic sound. Is Managing a Dental Practice the Genghis Khan Way. I think it's excellent. All right, here's another one that's bad. A Night Without Armor. And the night was an N-I... It's night as an evening. It's not night as in a warrior. Okay, so now here's two from Stephen Colbert. And I don't think Stephen Colbert actually wrote these titles, so I'm not blaming him for this. It was probably somebody else. But these are... So I've got two from Stephen Colbert that are bad. Okay, and I think these are bad. I don't think they sound good. I think that they're not clever. I think they're meant to be clever because he's supposed to be a comedian. And and then I have one from another person. I can't remember who it's from. And I'm not trying to rip on Stephen Colbert. I'm not even saying that because these are improper grammar or because they are weird or because they're incorrect to say that they're bad. So one is I am America and so can you. Okay? And it just doesn't sound right. It just doesn't fit together. It's not that it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't work. It's trying to be clever but missing the mark. And comedies like that. I'd like to do an episode on comedy someday. America Again. Here's the other Stephen Colbert one. America Again, Rebecoming the Greatness We Never Weren't. And this is another one that tries to be funny, but that just misses the mark. And again, it goes back to comedy. It just misses the mark with the comedy. And I'm not trying to rip on it because it's incorrect grammar or it's a weird way of saying. Here's one that I really, really like. And I think it's incorrect grammar completely, but it just encapsulates what the book is. It's Me Talk Pretty One Day. Okay? So it's not because it's wrong, and it's not because it's a humorous title. It's because of that aesthetic when putting it together. All right. And here's a couple more good ones. How to Raise Your IQ by Eating Gifted Children. I think it's an excellent title. And Mommy Drinks Because You're Bad. Just another good one. Okay. And again, these may not fit with a book at all, but there's a quality about specific titles that is different than other titles, okay? And maybe you've never noticed this. I notice this a lot. I think I'm like, that does not have a good title. That title is just awful or it doesn't fit, or they should have done something completely different. All right, so we're going to jump into the logical fallacy of the week. Going to do this pretty quickly because I'm already over time, because I always am over time. I thought I was going to go short today. Whatever. Today's logical fallacy of the week is another red herring. It is appeal to motive. So, just because someone has bad motives, or just because you say someone has bad motives, does not mean their argument is bad. Does not mean what they're saying is a bad thing, or how they're arguing is bad. You are only illogical if you are illogical, right? You are not illogical just because you have bad motives. Okay? So that is the logical fallacy of the week. I think that happens a lot. I think that when you're listening to somebody, I think it's important to be aware of where they're coming from. And if they're a deceitful person, be aware that they're a deceitful person, and maybe they might be trying to hoodwink you. But just because someone has a bad motive and they're trying to do something mean to you does not mean the logic of what they're saying is bad. All right? The worst person in the world can have a good logical argument. So that is all I have for you this week. I hope that you have a good rest of your week. I am Daniel Poppie, and this is How to Write Good.